Okay, just took a little break there. Now we're back, and clearly this Brian is only here to help, and it'll be fine. Right? Right. Surely. Cameron sits at the table as the bear busies himself near the stove top with his back to the coyote. Again, the coyote contemplates leaving, either by asking Brian again or just walking out the door. Another glance toward the window confirms Raincoat Monster is still out there, this time standing high in the trees, perched on a branch, still watching. Cameron quickly looks away again. He feels deep down that if he leaves, another terrible thing is going to happen. While he believes the bear's story about what happened, something about this trailer is extremely uncomfortable, making him even more anxious. I think that must have something to do with his upbringing, the long, narrow space feeling familiar in the worst of ways. It's like suddenly falling ill, and being reminded of all the awful feelings one has when they're especially sick. Meanwhile, Brian is chattering on about how chamomile is particularly effective when it comes to anxiety, and Cameron vaguely wonders why he's moving around so much if he's just making tea. Mostly, though, Cameron is trying to think clearly, get his thoughts to line up correctly through the fog he still feels clouding his brain. It's making him extremely tired, and a couple of times the coyote is convinced that he's still dreaming. It's almost like he's high again, without any of the positives of being high. His anxiety is already calming down, though, despite the worry that whatever was in the forest might have done some kind of damage to his brain. He focuses his thoughts on Devon, trying to think clearly. Would the bear really leave him alone like this? He could have at least left him a message to let him know that this is what he wanted, that Cameron is safe in this situation. But Cameron also knows that wouldn't have been all that practical. Devon really was in a hurry, which he definitely would have been. He would have left him behind if he knew it was for the best. If he knew the situation was safe. There isn't really a way he could have left a message anyway, except for maybe a text, but with no phone and no service. If this Brian guy really wants to help them, though, he should have gone to the highway instead. He has to have a car, right? It's like he can just survive out here in an old trailer. Cameron fixes his face into a pleasant smile, knowing that it seemed to set the old bear at ease whenever he did. Do you have a car? Brian, seemingly absorbed in what he's doing, glances back. Well, I kinda share a truck with another guy in town. He happens to be out of town with that truck right now. Of course he would be, right? Oh, okay. Brian smiles at him again. I can see why Daniel likes you. You're a friendly kid. Oh, you mean Devin? Shit, yeah. The brain doesn't remember things like it used to. You're fine. Cameron stares at the table, feeling like that exchange was very strange, but it's hard to think through the cloudiness. Despite the dulled anxiety, the feeling is worrying him more and more. I'm actually feeling really weird. I'm so tired. Well, considering what happened to you, that makes sense. Not to pry, but do you do any drugs? No, not anymore at least. I mean, I had some weed like hours ago, but that should have worn off by now. Brian shrugs. People people always say weed ain't a big deal, but it's probably what fucked me up the most back when I first tried it. Cameron listens to the sound of liquid being poured into a cup. Yeah, I don't think I like it. But I shouldn't still be high, right? You shouldn't. But after my first time smoking, I felt high for fucking years after. And I wasn't touching this stuff. Cameron feels a prickle of worry underneath the haze. Years? Yep. It's what's it called? Depersonalization? Made me feel like my own paws weren't my own. Everything looked all weird and distorted, like a filter was in front of my eyes. Cameron vaguely recalls some of his own friends describing the exact same thing, even when their trip was supposed to be over. He'd experienced it himself while under the influence of various dissociatives. Having the same experience while he's supposed to be sober is borderline terrifying, though. Weed does that? His worry and panic breaks through the surface for a second, and he feels like, for that moment, he's surfaced from the muddy depths of his confusion before slipping back under. He can't live in a dream for the rest of his life. But what even is his life? Sitting here in a trailer with an old, slightly smelly bear. Well, it went away once I stopped thinking about it. How did he even get here again? Where's Dev? Oh shit. Cameron suddenly grips the table, paws shaking as he feels as if he's lifting out of his body somehow. That he has to hold on to something to remain in place. Hey, you're alright, kid. Here, Ryan ambles over to his fridge, opens the freezer, pulls out the ice tray and drops a few cubes into the mug, the ice clinking loudly. He stirs it for a few moments, then turns back to the trembling coyote. Hope you don't mind the ice, but it should be cool enough to drink now. Still confused and terrified and just wanting something to do, to focus on, Cameron reaches out for the mug the bear is holding out to him. He takes it in a trembling paw, gulping it down. It's filled with honey and the strong taste of ginger. It's unlike any chamomile tea he's had before. The amount of honey is surprising. He briefly wonders if it's a bear thing, even though Devin never seemed to have much of an affinity for it. Still, Cameron doesn't get the full flavor of the concoction until he's finished it, and as he exhales, an odd, nutty taste mixed with what Cameron can only describe as dirt lingers on the back of his tongue. Cameron frowns at this bizarre, terrible tea. He can't help pulling a face as he looks into the mug, a thick, round glob of honey remaining at the base while dark particles slowly collect around it. It's distracting enough that his panic attack is terminated before it can really begin. Brian laughs. Sorry about that. I like to add in a kava root to soothe anxiety too. Should have warned you. Cameron had thought the taste was somehow familiar, but he supposes that any kind of root would have an earthy, bitter taste. Oh, it's okay. Just wasn't expecting it. I read about kava a few times when I was looking for ways to help with anxiety. Never tried it, though. Well, get ready for it to change your life. Cut me off all my chill pill meds. I do have some leftover bars if you need something stronger, though. Xanax? I'll wait and see. Well, that would be nice. Cameron already feels like falling asleep, so it doesn't seem like the best idea. While he mostly believes the bear's story, he doesn't want to be completely unaware of what's happening right now. I'm guessing you've had some experience with it before, huh? Cameron frowns at the table, not sure what to say. He doesn't really want to discuss his past with a stranger, even if the guy seems like he would understand. Brian puts his paws up, like he's showing that he's unarmed. Hey, I don't judge, kid. I was into that lifestyle for most of my life before I started turning things around. Well, Cameron is still cautious. He doesn't want to make it seem like he's suspicious. Doesn't feel like the best idea to sour things between him and the only other person with him in the middle of the desert. Yeah, I did a bit of everything in middle school and high school. The only thing I got hooked on was opioids, though. Oof, you and half the country, kid. That's a rough one. The tiredness is starting to plateau, if not recede slightly, and Cameron feels an odd but welcome sense of empathy toward the bear. Must be the kava kicking in. Brian's face appears a bit more defined and clear, and there's a warmness in his eyes. It was my first drug, too. I experimented with everything else because I was trying to find something less addictive and harmful. Brian shakes his head. That's the problem with it. There ain't much out there that makes you feel that good. That's what I'm told, anyway. Brian chuckles. I took just one of my dad's hydros and ended up puking my guts out for hours. Guess I'm lucky that I can't keep them down. Cameron thinks about that. About how nice it would have been if he had become violently ill whenever he tried opioids, or any drug for that matter. Yeah, I'd say that's some good luck. I quit in college and haven't done it since, though. Good for you. Brian gazes down his nose at Cameron, starting to frown. Cameron's ears twitch as he senses a sudden change in the mood. Now, I don't mean to bring this up again, but did your, visions get more intense when you did heroin? At first, Cameron wants to correct the bear and say that he's never done heroin, but then stops as he thinks back. Of course, his visions got worse whenever he was on certain drugs, including opioids, but he had assumed back then that they were just agitating his already present delusions. It was only today that he'd made the connection between drug usage and hallucinations, or visions. Yeah, actually, and a few times on other stuff, too. Does that happen to you? Definitely. Again, feelings of empathy grow in the coyote's chest. There are others like him, just like him. Maybe I'm not going crazy then. I keep going back and forth on that. Brian chuckles a bit. Well, not normal crazy anyway, right? Say. Brian looks carefully at Cameron again, and the coyote is almost distracted by the glow that seems to be emanating from the bear's eyes. Oddly enough, the intensely vivid and defined fur seems to be rippling, as if blowing in the wind, even though they're inside. Is this kava? You ever try something more trippy? Like acid or shrooms? Cameron shifts uncomfortably at the last word. Yeah, both. Acid was fine, but nothing weird happened. Shrooms just kind of fucked me up and I saw all kinds of things. That's too bad. That one can be a real eye-opener. Oh. Cameron isn't sure what else to say, just feeling just a bit uncomfortable again. But yeah, most drugs make you see more things. Only ones that don't are stims. That's why so many people here got into meth. Brian chuckles again, but this time it sounds a bit dark. Sinister, even. The only problem with that is meth still makes you see shit, but only because it makes you go crazy. Arches and half circles. Yeah. Cameron looks back down at the table. He wonders about his mother again, and maybe she was like him. Maybe she took the stimulants because she was just trying to stop the visions, but ended up starting a wave of hallucinations and delusions instead. Cameron watches the wood grain on the table shift and move slightly, like waves on an ocean. And then it hits him. It hits him hard. The aftertaste of the tea, why it was familiar, why things are moving in inexplicable ways, why everything is feeling more fucked up by the second. He's been here before. A moment seems to blank out of existence from Cameron's memory because the next thing he knows, he's already standing up, the chair sliding back behind him. He stares at Brian with wide eyes, mouth open, but he can't seem to say anything. He can't think of what to say if the bear did what he thinks he did. Brian stares back, watching Cameron carefully in a way that tells the coyote that the bear isn't surprised at all by this reaction, and that makes Cameron even more afraid. The cozy, dreamy lighting of the trailer becomes more ominous, red, and dangerous, and the bear in front of him seems to warp. Into a demon. No. No, no, no. What did you give me? Cameron looks wildly at the coffee mug. You need to calm down, understand? What did you give me? I think you already know the answer to that, so why don't you sit down and get it together? The bear's face is so warped, but Cameron honestly can't tell if it's real or not. Was it psilocybin? Did you drug me with shrooms? Brian says nothing, and he's right that Cameron knows. He could never forget this feeling. Oh my god, why? It ruined my life! Cameron is heaving for breath, sounds of his gasping almost drowning the bear out. Sit down and I'll explain. But Cameron has no intention of sitting down. The sensations and visuals are just as bad as the last time, if not worse. And he's only at the beginning. The fear and panic reach a dizzying level, and Cameron is running around the table for the door. And he's on his back, his chest, spine, and the back of his head aching. Brian is on top of him, and Cameron is on his back. You can see the coffee mug shattered on the ground a few feet away. Calm down. Calm down. Remember what I said about depersonalization? The only thing you can do is not to think about it. Otherwise, I'm gonna knock you out. Cameron struggles, wheezing for breath. Let me go. I can't breathe. Brian responds by squeezing his arms together, leaning more weight on Cameron's torso. Ah! Stop! I'm sorry! I'm sorry! He doesn't even know what he's apologizing for, just hoping that maybe it'll get the bear to stop. I thought you were cute when you were smiling. That statement, for whatever reason, is the scariest part of what's happening right now. He starts to scream for the only person he can think of right now. Devin! Help me, Devin! Devin! Shut the fuck up! Brian sounds legitimately disgusted as he pulls himself off of Cameron. The coyote prepares to scream again, but he sees Brian's foot lash out and kick him in the side, setting him up against the base of the counter. Then leaning over him with both of his giant paws on the edge of the counter, he starts kicking Cameron over and over. Cameron yelps and wheezes, the blows hard enough that he's worried the bear is definitely going to break something if he hasn't already. He thrashes and rolls, trying to escape. Then one kick catches him particularly hard at the base of his sternum, and he violently curls up, a loud frog-like croaking noise escaping from his throat. Brian pauses as the sounds continue emanating from Cameron's mouth. Cameron can hear the bear breathing heavily over him as Brian watches his agonized writhing, almost like he's fascinated by it. After nearly a minute, the terrible noises turn back to gasps, which then turn into sobs as Cameron stays curls up on his side. One arm around his midsection while the other is pressed over his eyes. Brian doesn't move, just watching as Cameron cries on the floor. First, Cameron thinks it might be better to just keep his eyes closed and try to disappear into the darkness. Maybe wake up again, but in a new place this time. Anywhere seems better than here. But that's when odd, slightly curved, glowing red lines begin expanding and shrinking behind his eyelids. Cameron whines at the terrible reminder of what's going to happen. He's going to trip, and it's going to be terrible. Cameron pulls his paw away from his eyes and finds that what he sees isn't much better. The huge bear is crouched in front of him, his fur now a writhing, pulsating mass of a thing that almost seems like another living creature covering the bear. Listen, what you do next is gonna determine what's gonna happen to you. This is a dream. It has to be a dream. Everything that's happened, not just in this trailer, but in this whole town. It has to be a dream, a hallucination, a trick. This can't be happening. I need you to talk to some folks I used to know. If you're really one of those psychics, if you can fix my problems, I'll let you go like nothing happened. Cameron? Devin comes to again, and he blurts out the name without thinking. He's not sure how long it's been since the last time he woke up. It feels like hours, possibly even days, since he was last conscious. He'd been dreaming. Something about insects crawling and biting his arms. And tornadoes. Twisting force. He realizes then that his arms are what brought him back to the waking world. They'd fallen asleep, and now the tingling is so bad that it feels like they're covered in crawling, writhing ants made of molten lead. The bear grunts in discomfort and tries to bring them down from above his head, but he isn't able to. They come up short, and he hears a rattling sound close to his ears, which twitch at the loudness. Chains? Devin freezes, keeping his eyes closed, unsure if whoever did this to him is close by. Although it's hard to think through all the haziness, the memories come back to him rather quickly. First, he remembers walking deeper into the woods before the strange bear went into his trailer to get something. He came out with a water bottle, claiming it was for Cameron. Then after walking further into the dense forest, they came upon a white van. The exact kind of van that would make most people suspicious. Devin did become more suspicious, but by that time it was too late. The old bear had pulled a gun on them, one that wasn't his shotgun, and told them both to get into the van. Artie started to run, and the other bear didn't hesitate to shoot him, aiming for his head. Devin isn't sure, but he could swear that he saw a spray of something, whether it be fur, blood, or worse, fan out from the back of Artie's head before he dropped. Devin's fingers and toes clench inward as he thinks about that moment. The sound, the suddenness of it. Mostly, he remembers the way Artie fell. It was instant, like strings that held him up had been cut, crumpling so quickly that Devin is sure that he'd been killed. At that point, Devin did everything the old bear had told him to do, including lying Cameron down on the rough desert floor. Devin tries to keep from whining as he wonders if that might be the last time he saw Cameron. And then laid down in the van and letting him bind his arms up. Thought about fighting back in that moment, but it was so quick that before he knew it, he was secured and he was made to drink from the bottle. Now he's in the very center of the tornado. The twisting force. Devin clenches his eyes shut even tighter, feeling moisture gather at the corners. Around the point is equal to force times distance, but he opens them a moment later, realizing that his captor would have seen all the movements he'd made. Perpendicular to force, he's alone in the van. His eyes sting, and the bear realizes that he's sweating heavily. This metallic box he's stuck in is hot, almost overwhelmingly stifling. He worries for a moment that he slept through the night and now it's sunrise and he's about to cook to death in this van. But after gauging the light, he's deciding it's still around sunset, just a few hours after what happened. After Artie had been killed. Shit. Devin squeezes his eyes shut again, feeling tears leak out and into the moist fur on his cheeks. He allows himself this moment, but quickly focuses again, knowing Cameron is still out there with that bear. That's enough to get a rise from Devin, one that builds into a wave in his chest. A combination of adrenaline and terror, but mostly fury. While the brutality of this backwoods bear evokes fear in Devin, it also makes him angry that anyone would feel they have the right to do what the old bear did. He opens his eyes again and takes in his surroundings. He's lying flat on his back, arms stretched out above his head. He can feel that it's a pair of handcuffs that are holding him in place. There's enough give that slowly he's able to turn over on his stomach. The action is incredibly painful. Devin can't help but grunt loudly, his arms feeling like they might fall off as they spasm. Slowly, painfully, he pulls himself up into a kneeling position, getting a better look at his predicament. He realizes then that these handcuffs are more like shackles, meant to hold bear-sized creatures like himself in place. They're bolted to the floor of the van. Then Devin glances up suddenly, his ears catching what sounds like a faint cry outside the van. Cameron? Devin's voice comes out hoarse and cracked once more. Was that Cameron? It sounded like him. Devin is still groggy from whatever was in that bottle of water, but he's sure he heard the distinct sound of his boyfriend's voice. The fact that it's now so suddenly absent convinces Devin that it was definitely Cameron. He strains to listen for several more seconds, but can't hear anything. He looks down at the heavy chain linking the metal cuffs around his wrists. Unbreakable. Still, he finds himself foolishly yanking at the shackles, hoping there'd be some kind of give in the slightly rusted chains and bolts. Shit. Tears fill Devin's eyes, the feeling of falling forever returning. He'd felt this way only a few times before. The first time being while he was running home after he'd found Lupita's body. The last time being when he saw Arturo getting shot. And now, knowing that his boyfriend could be at the mercy of this bear whose intentions Devin can't even begin to guess. He just knows that they're horrific. But seeing the faces of those people, it changes something in Devin. A cool, icy calm descends on him, and he looks at the chains carefully. His classes in physics had taught him all about the ways in which force is exerted can seemingly accomplish things that seem impossible. So, even while his heart hammers in his ears, and even while his brain is clouded with a dense fog of sedation, Devin analyzes the chain and the bolts holding it in place. Torque. Cameron stays curled up on the floor for what feels like a long time. He had ultimately decided that he'd rather watch the harmless, pulsating arches dance behind his eyelids rather than the nightmare the trailer is becoming. Every minute or so, the reality of the situation hits the coyote, and a burst of whimpering gasps escape his muzzle for a few minutes before fading back to only whimpering. He would stay down there until his trip was over, but Brian ended up pulling him back to where he was sitting. At this point, the coyote doesn't fight the bear, going limp while his body is pulled along. For a minute, Brian tries to get him to sit in the chair, but eventually just gives up, dropping Cameron next to the table where he just lies on the floor. The coyote listens to the old bear moving around the trailer, though it's barely audible over his own gasping sobs. Eventually, those lumbering, shuffling footsteps come closer, and Cameron knows that the old bear is crouching next to him, but the coyote still doesn't open his eyes. Listen, kid. Since you ain't gonna calm down, you're taking some Xans, got it? Cameron listens but doesn't move, afraid to do anything. Then he flinches as a rough, callous paw grabs up his chin, forcing his mouth open slightly. Finally, Cameron opens his eyes a bit and almost gasps at the vivid red lighting, which keeps him distracted until something falls into his mouth. A pill. Cameron recognizes its distinct bar-shaped and bitter taste. Brian holds out a cup, a plastic one that Cameron looks at with undisguised fear. It's just water. The old bear gestures at the counter where a gallon jug sits, and Cameron still doesn't move Brian's eyes. He gets up, grabs a cup straight out of the sink and pours it half full before drinking it. Cameron's mouth is as dry as the desert surrounding them, likely due to a combination of drugs and fear, and he really doesn't want to swallow the pill to get rid of the taste. No, he really does want to swallow the pill to get rid of the taste. So he takes the cup and drinks, swallowing the Xanax, and despite his fear, he drinks until the cup is empty. He vaguely remembers his high school friends telling him to drink water to make his trip less intense. Cameron has the feeling that it probably won't change anything. Brian takes the cup from the coyote's limp paw, and it takes Cameron a second to realize that the bear is holding out another pill that looks like a small, red square. Now put this one under your tongue. Cameron stares, trying to figure out if it's just the trip making it look that color, or... Brian sighs again, becoming more impatient. I broke a third off the bar I gave you. But now Cameron is sure the pill is actually red. He draws back. Counterfeit pill. That probably means it's cut with something. Something like opioids. I don't. Brian slaps him, the strike coming so fast that Coyote isn't even sure what happened. The sudden numbing sting on the left side of his face, along with the bright flash of light, is very, very familiar, though. And Cameron feels as though he's traveled 7 years back in time. His delayed reaction is a surprised gasp as he raises his arm over his face. The bear yanks his arm back down and thrusts the pill at his muzzle. This time, the coyote opens his mouth willingly, maneuvering the pill to sit under his tongue. His movements feel almost robotic at this point. To Cameron's immense relief, this seems to satisfy the bear, and Brian gets up from his crouching position, backing away. Coyote sits there a moment, then slowly drags himself under the table, huddling in a corner as tears well up in his eyes again. After going through all that, and knowing that there's plenty more to go through, Cameron longs for Devin more than he ever has before. He waits until the pill dissolves before asking the question that he dreads hearing the answer to. Is Devin, the bear, is he still alive? If this giant, violent bear hadn't encountered Devin and Artie, there's no telling what he might have done to them. His heart drops as the bear seems to hesitate. Please, tell me the truth. Cameron needs to know. The bear's fine. He's locked up, but fine. His tone sounds genuine, and even though Cameron will never trust him, he has to hold on to some hope. And if I do this for you, you'll let him go too? That's the plan. Your boyfriend? Cameron isn't sure how best to respond to that, so he doesn't. Brian shrugs. It doesn't matter much to me. Just do what I tell you, and you'll both be out of here by tomorrow. It's quiet for a moment, and Brian moves to the other end of the trailer, opening the fridge and doing whatever it is he does. Cameron doesn't bother keeping track. Let me know when you start seeing shit. Got something to do real quick. Cameron blurts out the other question weighing heavy on his mind. And Arturo, the cat, is he... Brian doesn't look back and just sighs again. Cameron doesn't ask any follow-up questions, feeling like he got his answer. The thought that Artie might be gone is too messed up for his drugged-up mind, especially because he feels certain that he can't be gone. Cameron can't explain why, but he just feels it. He feels Dev, and he feels Artie. Brian stands next to the door, holding a plastic water bottle. Gonna go out for about 5 minutes. I'll be right next to the trailer, so if I see you try anything, I'll shoot your boyfriend in front of you, then I'll kill you. Eventually. Cameron doesn't move. But soon, the trip intensifies, and he hugs himself, the movement making his ribs ache from the earlier kicks. He just watches the vivid colors and shapes of his hallucinations. Meanwhile, the acrid taste of Xanax lingers on his tongue. Okay, break time. Ugh.